Hey, welcome everybody. This is Talking Niagara with Peter Giblett and Dave Wheeler, and it's your kind of news and affairs talk show for Niagara area, happening every morning, weekday morning at 7 a.m. There we go.
Nice.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so we got a number of stories going on here. Interesting. So before we go into any of these, a couple of local restaurants ended up being closed during February. Dairy Queen in Geneva Street was closed after because it had a failed an inspection. Right, and there was a fire closure at the Far East restaurant in Thoroldstone.
I didn't even know that. I live a few doors down from there.
Yeah. How did you not know?
Well, probably because it was a fire enclosure that was a fire.
Yeah, there was basically, well, it was closed from February 23rd to February 26th. Health officials, obviously conduct regular inspections, but I presume that there was a fire internally in the kitchen.
Could be. It can be extremely busy. That's a very popular restaurant. Well, it's almost all takeout now. I don't even know if they
they do. They still do sit down, I believe.
Okay, but they're extremely popular restaurant. They've been around for a very long time. As a matter of fact, it opened up when I was still in high school. As
Really?
It changed from a truck stop called Gidget's. It was a truck. You notice it's got a really big parking lot there because at one time it was a truck stop.
Yeah.
So it no longer can be a truck stop because it's not as remote as it used to be. And but anyway, I remember when it changed from the truck stop Gidget's to the Far Out, as we used to call it. I still call it the Far Out. It's the Far East, of course. But back in that day, because you go in there and got really good food, and you go, "Oh, Far Out, man."
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So So was that one of the first Chinese restaurants you had in Niagara?
No, I don't think so. The famous New York restaurant down at Clifton Hill may have been one of the most famous for many years. I remember that because it was one of the first incidences of mixed marriage that I remember, because the guy that owned the New York restaurant, which was a Chinese restaurant just at the top of Clifton Hill there, or on Center Street, actually, just past.
That's what I think. It's on Center. It's still there today, isn't it?
I'm not so sure.
Actually, maybe that isn't still there, but it was still there about 10 to 15 years ago. I think it was still there about 10 to 15 years ago, and then it reopened as something else.
Yeah, I remember because an old lady I was a dishwasher during the summer months one year on Clifton Hill, and the old Italian lady that I worked with, Mama Lucy, everybody called her. She was the real boss of the kitchen. She was about like 5 feet tall, and I have fond memories of her. And in any case, her daughter actually married the guy who owned it. He was a Chinese guy, and back in those days, it was still very remarkable to have somebody of mixed marriage.
Yeah.
And so that was, of course, quite fascinating to me.
Yeah.
It was a very, very different thing, and there was a lot of prejudice heaped upon them for that.
When was this? In the 70s?
In the 70s, probably about, I would think about 71, 72, somewhere in there.
Oh, yeah. Well, there would have, I get it. There would be. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so fond memories of that place.
Well, not that place so much, but the mother.
The people. Yeah.
Yeah. I worked in a restaurant which was made North American food. but the whole kitchen staff, all the cooking staff were Chinese. They came down seasonally to work in the kitchen at the Clifton restaurant, Niagara Clifton restaurant, which I was a dishwasher there.
Yeah.
And the whole staff, cooking staff, were Chinese, and they made the food that everybody wanted, North American style food, for themselves. And of course, Mama Lucy was right in there, and of course they knew that her daughter had married a Chinese guy, but she was boss of the kitchen. She would tell everybody, and she told me early on, don't eat the food that they cook here, because you're allowed to have a meal there at a very inexpensive price for your lunch. So quickly on, I didn't bring any lunch for my lunch break. We didn't get much anyway because it was so busy back in those days. If you couldn't take a half an hour, that was nuts. If you got 10 minutes, you were lucky.
Mm-hmm.
But those guys made food for themselves for their breaks, and that once they discover, and Mama Lucy told them, give Dave your food, give him some food. So they gave me some food, and they thought they thought I needed enormous amounts of food because I was so strong. They witnessed me carrying 3 cases of ketchup up from the cellar all at once, and they thought this was an amazing feat of strength, because those little guys could hardly lift one up, and I come up with 3 all at the same time. And so,
well, you just didn't want to traipse back down there again, did you?
Yeah, they sent me down to get 3 cases of ketchup, so I brought all 3 up at the same time, and it was no big deal for me. I mean, that was a high school.
But hey,
era, you know what I mean?
But if I told you got to go down and get those 3 boxes today, you wouldn't be able to do that, would you?
I probably have more. I could probably still lift them, but I would have more issues with balance now than anything.
Yeah, you would. What I mean is, you wouldn't bring them up the stairs.
No, I would probably maybe bring them up one at a time now or something, exactly. Whatever. But in any case, they gave me an enormous amount of food. They get a big steak plate, put a bed of rice on it, and put all the stuff that they cooked, all this real Chinese food, the kind of food that they ate. And I would eat that. And I knew that it was important for them to see that I liked the food. It was a point of honor for them.
Of course.
Actually. And when I ate that food and I relished it, it was fabulous. It couldn't be better. Yeah. And I made sure that I came hungry and ate every last kernel of rice, because they watched me. They kept an eye on me. And when I finished it, they all clapped every day. Oh, Dave, yeah, Dave, I'll go. And I hear all this Chinese stuff, and they clap, and and they go over and they put their hand on my muscles, and yeah.
Oh no. Okay. All right. Yeah. Anyway, so let's move on from that. So Ottawa is okay. So actually, let's not move on from that for a moment, because we've got a whole heap of comments. So good morning from Mike.
Physical Mike.
Right.
Completely random, off grid. Hello from Kenya. No way. All right.
There you go. Good morning, gentlemen, from Randy West. Okay.
Hi, Randy. A nice cup of a mint mug. Nice Disney mug. Oh yeah, we got the lady. Yeah. A lady I work with, Qantas TV Bingo, a charitable bingo thing. She gives me a present every Christmas, and for some reason she gave me this one, one Christmas. But the reason I'm not much of a Mickey Mouse fan, basically, but the mug is huge.
Yeah. All right. So first of all, Ottawa removing half of the federal internal trade barriers.
Woohoo! Finally.
Yeah.
This is
Why not? Why half? Why only half measures though?
Well, it doesn't. They can't do it as fast as you think they can. There's all kinds of things, but they're getting rid of a lot of the impediments to interprovincial trade. They think that once they drop the trade barriers well enough, that we can generate $200 billion more revenue right here in Canada. Up until now, we've been very, very lazy. We've been protectionist against each other province more than we've been protecting against American stuff coming into the country, because our border is long and it's easier to go south than east and west.
Yeah.
Even Quebec has opened up its mind about developing natural gas, getting a pipeline through Canada. The threats to our independence is now existential because of that guy down there south of the border.
Well, there's still a couple of internal things that we do need to do. For example, if you've got unpasteurized milk being made into cheese in Quebec, you're not allowed to export that cheese to Ontario. And some of the Quebec cheese is actually truly excellent. And, you know, hey, let's stop, stop that problem.
Yeah. And that the provinces are getting ready to amalgamate and standardize the regulations across the board. The cheese thing and the dairy thing is always going to be an issue because we have a quota system to protect our dairy farmers. What is truth in the world today, particularly in North America? We have an overproduction of milk. An overproduction of milk in the United States particularly means that they are going to be able to offer a lot of milk a whole lot cheaper, and it will wipe out our dairy farmers. However, this is not a good system, not even for the Americans, because they are then, if I've watched interviews with American dairy farmers, and their backs are up against the wall because the production level is so high, the price is low. What's happening is dairy farmers are being pushed off the farms and big conglomerates are picking it up. The overproduction of milk then is dumped on the world market. And of course, the closest market for them is Canada.
Yeah, and the worst about a product like milk is it only has a limited lifetime.
Yeah, it has a limited shelf life. I think a lot of it should be converted into powder milk so it could be sent all over the world. My God, you could. As a matter of fact, when I was in Libya, a Palestinian guy made cheese out of powdered milk.
Really?
Wow. I don't know where, and it was great. I don't know how he did it.
I wouldn't have thought you could do that, but hey, congratulations to him.
Yeah. And I said, where do you get the milk? Because in Libya, you didn't get much milk. You know, I don't even remember. I remember canned cream for your coffee, but that's about it. And yeah, I'm telling you, it was fabulous. I don't know how he did it. He told me how he did it, but of course it went in one ear and out the other. Because
yeah, I get it. Because you asked him the question, how do you do that? But you didn't expect the answer.
Well, I did expect the answer, but I don't know, when he starts talking about cheesecloths and how he mixed it and all that other stuff. He kind of lost me a bit. You know, I couldn't because I actually did not intend to make any myself at the particular time, but I've always remembered it.
Yeah.
You know, so I think if the United States or even Europe overproduces milk, then that's a good way to do it. However, we find that the United States the American administration right now is kind of against this USAID thing, where farmers in the United States relied on the USAID to buy their overproduction of grains and agricultural products and send them all over the world, because the United States overproduces grains for export. And one of the big export markets was the United States themselves buying that grain and sending it to different places around the world to alleviate hunger. So I don't know. In any case, that's going to be an issue, but the drop in interprovincial regulations and impediments to interprovincial trade will help us a great deal. As a matter of fact, Nova Scotia has opened its province to all other provinces already. Ontario is on its way to do that. I think BC is on its way to do that as well. Randy West says, I have a curious question. In all the news and conversations of trade and jobs and free trade for the last few years, the terms billions and trillions are thrown around towards deficits to government and profits to banks and business. Why is it my bank account is still working in 10s, 20s, and 50s?
I have the same question, but I think mine's working in ones and tens right now, or at least it feels that way, right? Hey, and I spend the money. I spend the money I need to pay the bills I've got, and then I've got nothing.
All right. One thing we hear a lot about is the 10%. Well, actually, the 1% a lot of the most wealthiest people in North America and I will tell you, or also the 10%ers. They call them the 10 most wealthiest people in North America. But I'll put this to you and our audience. Living in North America, getting a decent wage in North America would put you in the top 10% of earners in the whole world. Think of that. If you want to compare your income to those people around the world, you are in that. Yeah, an average guy having an average pretty good job here is in the top 10% earners in the entire world.
Yeah. And that's probably true with Europeans as well. If you're in the higher paid brackets.
Yeah. And you think of the vast areas of China, India, all of Africa, all the different countries in Africa, all the diverse countries in Africa. They are now coming along, particularly Africa. There's a lot of potential there. The different African nations are the continent of Africa. All in all, should within the next 100 years start the process that we started over 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And their standard of living rise, hopefully. And
so Randy West has got an answer to your powdered milk situation, right?
Okay.
He said he would add an active yeast to work on the powdered or dead milk to get it to curdle.
That's probably what he did. Yes.
Yeah.
And any yeast I found in Libya, I used it for my beer.
Yeah.
Which was illegal. And what could have thrown me in prison, but
well, and actually they used to use when I was in Saudi Arabia, they used to use baker's yeast, activate the baker's yeast, and then somehow they'd have to go through this process to actually make it even stronger, the baker's yeast, because baker's yeast isn't strong enough for brewing, and they'd use this kind of heightened baker's yeast to make their beer with.
Yeah, we had our techniques too, but what we really didn't make beer. We made flash, but we had biomalt, which was a baby food, and it came in cans. It was like a thick syrup. So that added the malt flavor, and then we got hops and boiled the water that we were going to use to make our flash in the hops. So now we had the hops flavor and the malt flavor in the water, and then we just added sugar and yeast, any yeast, and what we did was make flash, which is a quick way of making alcohol. Anybody can make alcohol with sugar, water, yeast. That's all you need.
Yeah.
And, but we flavored it with biomalt and
well, what they used to do,
it tasted like beer, but it wasn't really beer.
Yeah, what they used to do in Saudi Arabia in the place that I was at, I never see how they do it, but they used to go down and they get the non-alcohol beer from the supermarket, get a few slabs of that, bring that back. So when they'd make their mix, which I'm presuming is pretty much the same as what you're talking about, they'd then add beer to it.
Yeah.
Alcohol-free beer to it. So
Flash is absolutely terrible tasting on its own, but if anyone wanted to get drunk quick and easy and fast, you could make Flash, and that would do it. It comes up to about, you can get it up to about 12% if you really work your ratios, and if you let the thing ferment slowly, and that's the real key here. Flash, you could make it in 2 or 3 days. That's how fast you can make it if you add heat to it. But if you want to make something more flavorful with all the different ingredients I just described, what you want the fermentation process to be slow over the pace of 5 or 6 days. If that happens, then it tastes pretty good.
Yeah. Well, the guys who made this used to work for Aramco. So they kind of had, I guess they had fairly long shifts, 12-hour shifts, but they used to do like 3 days on, 3 days off.
Yeah, we used to work every day.
Yeah.
But anyway, education has finally brought movement to so many of the smaller countries who are realizing the world has gotten smaller and markets are more within their own reach, as opposed to countries like England, who used to come in and control the resources of lesser educated people. Well, lesser empowered people for sure.
But definitely. England can't do that anymore. England no longer has that power. I have to be blunt about that.
No.
Or Britain, more correctly.
They tried it out for 300 years, and
they were successful at it for 300 years.
Yeah.
But just not today, not anymore.
Which is always an incredible thing. That little country, and it didn't have that many people in it, went around the world and colonized.
Yeah, biggest colony in history.
It's still, even at their maximum population, it was still quite a feat.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow. Organization or what? And still, after all that, they still have lousy food.
I think the Commonwealth has some great food, by the way.
Yes, and one of the tongue-in-cheek reasons for England going out, or Britain in general going out and conquering the world, is because they were constantly looking for better food.
Maybe. Well, yeah, but you see, when you think about it, you go to England today, and I'd say you've got some absolutely superb restaurants in Britain, but they're not necessarily British food. They're things like Indian, European foods and the like.
Yes, and that's really
top class. Absolutely top class. One British restaurant was one time named the best restaurant in the world by Michelin.
Wow.
Which
kind of makes me wonder how is it that people who make tires know about food? But anyway, we'll get into that later.
That's another question entirely. Okay. So it's an interesting one. There's our latest snowstorms are nothing on 1894. They're showing this snowstorm, the blizzard of 1894 February, and the snow piles are more than 2 meters high, hard ice. And the picture is, for any of those that are familiar, is actually on St. Paul Street in St. Catharines. And you can see the same shops today same buildings today there, except some of them have been pulled down for more recent developments.
Yes. Basically, I added this article as just for historical interest for our listeners.
Oh, yeah, I know.
This is in 18. We talk about the blizzard of 77. Many of our
probably the best you've got to remember, right?
Yeah, many of our listeners will remember that, where there was so much snow that it topped the telephone poles. I remember going out to try to find my car, and I did, because a swirl in the snow had exposed one side of it, but I had to climb down the side of the drift to get to the side of my car. And and I looked down on my car when I finally found it, and only found it because a little bit of it was exposed. I was walking over cars to get to try to find my car on Thorlstone Road. That's how much snow we had. So this is pretty much telling you that, and in this particular case, it was St. Catharines that got it. In the blizzard of 77, most of St. Catharines was spared that particular blizzard. So when I read about this, I wondered which way the wind may have come to dump that much snow in St. Catharines.
It probably came across Lake Ontario, bringing it from the north, and gave it some additional lake effect across Lake Ontario, probably.
Possibly. Usually the lake effect snow comes from Fort Erie because it's
I know.
milder, it's a warmer lake.
Yeah.
And so it moisture picks up off that lake more.
But if it would come, if it wouldn't have dumped on St. Catharines if it had come from Lake Erie. It must have come across Lake Ontario.
It may have come from another snow belt would be the one that comes out of Lake Huron. So that might have been the one.
Yeah, it may have blown It may have blown down through, places like Goderich and, the Northwest to get here. Yeah.
But anyway,
we simply don't know.
We were complaining about all the snow we got this year, just recently too, and that's just a good reminder of we didn't get that much compared to other times.
Well, my front garden's still got, I just looked out there today. My front garden's still got about 1.5 feet on it in a big pile.
Yeah, sure. Right after that big melt and the rain and all that. And, so that gives you an idea. But anyway, with any kind of luck, we won't get dumped on. We will get snow still, but we're not going to get that much, hopefully. But it could happen.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. All right, moving on. Port of Churchill is actually doubling its critical mineral shipment capacity. Now, Churchill's in Regina, isn't it? No, not Regina. What's it, Matt? Next province along. Manitoba. Thank you.
Churchill, Manitoba.
Yeah, but it's only just across the actual border from. It's just west of that border from Ontario. I
remember Ontario has quite a bit of shoreline on James Bay and a little bit on Hudson Bay too.
Yeah. So this is Hudson, but this is Hudson Bay, and it's got it's the biggest port on Hudson Bay, I believe.
Well, saying the biggest port on Hudson Bay is a relative thing.
I know, and it doesn't make it a big port.
Yeah, it's like saying the biggest grain of sand on the beach. It's small. You know what I mean? It's still small. But it's encouraging. They're breaking open, and of course, in this particular case, the indigenous peoples of the area have an interest in that port. Now, what they're doing is they're shipping out zinc from there, which is very encouraging. That port is open up and it's doubled in size and doubled the capacity. So the reason why I put it there, it's a very good sign that there are other means by which our economy can be driven, particularly our resource economy.
Well, they're talking about 10,000 tons of zinc concentrate being shipped out of the port. I haven't a clue as to what that, I don't know what zinc concentrate is used for. I think there's zinc in stainless steel, but, I don't know what other uses zinc has. But and I don't know how big that is in terms of the grand scheme of things.
Zinc is often added to copper to make a sort of a bronze, or not bronze, a brass. They make brass by introducing zinc into copper. It's one of the alloys that make brass.
Well, it's an alloy that's used for a lot of things, isn't it?
Yeah, it's also used for galvanization. So if you see a lot of girders and steel, quite often they're galvanized with zinc that protects the steel from rust for many long years. And there's a whole lot of things that zinc does, and to get that mineral out.
And it's a good thing. Yeah. So we're opening up new markets through that northern port.
Yes. Yes. Now, I forgot where I put that article. Anyway, so that's a that's an excellent thing. And then the port of Churchill in Manitoba is tripled the storage capacity. Also, is planned for Manitoba Port. And like I said, this is a good thing for the First Nations that up there, because they have an interest in that, and also in the Hudson Bay Railway. So that's a very good thing for that little community, and it's beginning to show that these more northern, more remote areas of Canada are beginning to open up a little bit. One of the big problems with the Indigenous peoples up in those areas is they were so remote and so isolated from the rest, and their typical ways of life were just taken away from them, and they're thrown on reservations. Well, this is a very good thing, because now this will bring wealth to those communities, and it also helps us develop our vast northern territories.
And I'm presuming that the zinc comes from local area.
It would be mine, because they're talking about the Hudson Bay Railroad that brings the zinc to the port.
It would have to be mined locally, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing, because it means it brings economic development.
Yes, indeed. So I just threw that in there. So with all the news of looming recessions and trade wars, I just thought a little bit of positive news there would be nice.
Well, that helps us that helps us fulfill things. Okay. And what Niagara wineries are hoping that to fill the LCBO gap by having Niagara products put on the shelves. More Niagara.
The article is called "Glass Half Full." So right now, there is a sweep of patriotism coming to Canada that we have this existential threat from the American trade war that's being launched against us. So what people are doing, of course, is looking for Canadian things to buy in replacement of the American things we usually buy.
I would just, in one point as far as I'm concerned, let's put some of those wineries that are not on the LCBO list onto the LCBO list, get them into the LCBO.
Well, that's part of the article, because now there are shelf space freed up where we've taken all the American wines off the shelves in our sort of counter sortie to the U.S. trade war here, largely symbolic, but this will make shelf space available for the smaller wineries around here. That is what it says here in the
absolutely. That's the way we should do it. Smaller wineries, get them up there. They have enough trouble getting sales anyway.
It says here the U.S. tariffs weren't even in place yet when restaurants started calling Henry of Pelham Family Estate Winery in West St. Catharines about replacing their California wines with local product. These are the customers that are coming to the restaurant and saying, "Hey, wait a minute, you only have a few Canadian. Like, get these American ones off. I want a Canadian alternative to this." And that is this has challenged the wineries in the area to be able to replace those California wines with locally made wine.
There's dozens of wineries out there, but not just in the Niagara region, but there's dozens of wineries that don't get on the list for whatever reason on the LCBO list.
Yes. So because so many of them are so small right now. And sort of craft wineries, but you get a VQA. Remember, look for VQA, which is Vintage Quality Land.
Well, many of those small wineries are all VQA.
So what they do for anyone that doesn't know, VQA means that the grapes that make the wine are entirely grown in Canada, in Ontario. However, there's another aspect of these regulations we were talking about and trade barriers between the provinces. They're thinking of standardizing wines in Canada to make a mark on them, a distinction that they are made entirely with Canadian grapes. So you can get a bottle of wine from BC, and it would have some kind of marking on it to tell you that it
much in the same way as France and Germany does that. They have their equivalent of VQA marks on their wine.
VQA just designates Ontario wine for now.
Yeah.
I know. Still, being an Ontarian, if I go buy a bottle of wine, I usually look for VQA.
Yeah, but there's a mark, like we have VQA in Ontario, French wine and high quality French wine, high quality German wine, I believe Italian as well, but I don't know too much about Italian wines. All have an equivalent of VQA mark on it, the good ones.
Well, it's going to be a little bit of although it's with mixed feelings. The wineries are saying, okay, well, this is good for us because we can fill the spots from American wines, but also reintroduce ourselves to the Canadian market once again to be able to show our wares and to make Canadian, particularly Ontario buyers, more introduce them more to our wines again. So that's a little bit of a windfall for them, but of course they have mixed feelings because they understand that the trade war will have disastrous effects, and that's not good for Canada overall. But in the meantime, they may make a little extra money.
Also, the other thing that needs to be done is put some Niagara beers on that list as well.
Yeah, he says the silver lining of all this could be that people purchasing Ontario products in lieu of American products. He said people who haven't had Ontario wine lately have an opportunity to revisit it, try new brands, and increase the support of local businesses. I'm all for that.
Yeah, and there's a number. We have a number of craft breweries as well, and we should be making sure that we're adding those into the list as well.
I don't know. There's a whole lot of booze out there.
Yeah.
Even in my most consumptive times of my life, I don't think I could go through all the different beers that are out there.
Yeah, well, there's a lot out there. Let's put them up on display. There's a few places. You see, I know there's a few places. There's a few stores that actually sell a lot of these, locally grown, made beers. Sorry, grown. You don't grow beers. Locally made beers. And they've got a lot of support locally in certain areas. Right, you've got people like Bench Brewing Company, the Niagara Brewing Company, and others out there that all craft breweries that are actually we need our support.
It says here the big question is how is the LCBO going to deal with the extra shelf space? Norman Beale, Vice President of Ontario Craft Wineries, President of Peninsula Ridge Estates Winery in Beamsville, said, the situation is bittersweet, just like I said before. He said the wine industry is hoping the trade war results in a real demand for locally grown products like VQA wine and transitions consumers from U.S. imports to quality local wines. At the same time, they'd rather not have a trade war at all. So there you go. But the real problem here is if you go to Napa Valley in California, it is insanely huge.
Karen's pointing out there's a craft brewery show at Niagara College this weekend. Is that I'm presuming that's the Niagara on the Lake campus?
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, it would make sense. It would be Niagara on the Lake campus because of the fact that that's involved in wine and beer production anyway. It's a part of the school there.
Okay, Karen, if you go there, don't forget to get a designated driver.
Yeah. Okay.
We here at Talking Niagara don't want to report a story about a wild senior causing trouble because she got went to the
Honestly, Dave. Honestly. Right. Okay. What did she say? Okay, so yes, it is on the Niagara Lake campus. All right.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah. Okay, so and again,
look, I want to read something here, which just drives me nuts. It's of course about the trade war, but I'll bring this up if I can get it.
Yeah.
Here. This is oh darn it! It went away. Shoot. It was what Trump tweeted about Canada killing the Americans, and it's about a trade that the trade war was actually a drug war and all that. The way he expressed it was I don't know. It was
paraphrase.
Nuts. He just says that the whole problem here was that Canada was irresponsible and it was killing Americans with the fentanyl coming over the border. Remember, 45 pounds of it all of last year. 45 pounds compared to 21,000 pounds coming from Mexico. And not including the stuff that's manufactured in the United States itself, which is always left off the thing.
Yeah,
and the amount of illegals coming into the United States from Canada, which is a dribble, and they go back and forth. Some illegals come into Canada, some illegals go into the States. So it's an overstated lie.
Yeah.
Basically, it has nothing to do with those things. And I don't know how many Americans are flim-flam by that. No matter how many times we tell them, like only 45 pounds went from Canada to the United States in all of last year, compared to 21,000 pounds that came from, well, actually closer to 22,000 pounds that came from Mexico. Like it 0.0, like less than 1% of the whole amount came from Canada, and it never talks about the traffic.
There's another one I came across yesterday. I was talking about something on Facebook, and they said, yeah, it's what about the 200 billion US dollars that goes from Canada, from the US to Canada every year, that's given by the US government? Like, so I put source ?
Yeah, where does that come from?
Yeah, give me a source of information about where that comes from. And the guy says, watch it on Fox News. And I went, okay, so it doesn't really exist then.
Yeah, what I'm really like kind of looking like everybody knows that even Trump followers know he's pretty fast and loose with the truth. So we mentioned this yesterday. I mentioned the same thing. I said, we keep hearing about this $200 billion. Remember, it started at $100 billion.
Yeah.
That U.S. Trump started, we subsidized Canada to the tune of $100 billion. That grew to $200 billion in a month. So where does that source from? Where it's never really spoken of. Where is that?
I'm actually I want to see and I want to read that particular source. I'd love to know the information. I just think it's crap, to be quite blunt.
Yeah.
All right, but anyway, going on, news on this is 1 month exemption for US automakers. But before we get to there, Randy says, as everyone knows, to cite their source, and the response will be very lonely and sarcastic. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess Trump and Trudeau had a conversation over the telephone, which included a lot of swearing and yelling. Apparently, it went on for about 45 minutes, I guess. Trudeau called it colorful, but in that conversation, Trudeau held him to task on some of these facts. And then at the end of it, Trump decided that Trudeau was using the whole situation to stay in power. He obviously doesn't understand Canadian politics.
Yeah.
Trudeau is a lame duck prime minister. He's going to be out of office as soon as the Liberal Party chooses another leader, which will be, what is that, in a couple of days or so?
Right? 2 days, Sunday.
Yeah. So Sunday. The Liberal Party will replace him on Sunday, and it's up to the new leader, the new leader, when he's going to take over for prime minister. But this is really, when Trump says that this is Trudeau's attempt to stay in power rather than hold an election, he really doesn't understand Canadian politics one bit. And that is a comment of extreme ignorance. The problem is that same ignorance is then transferred through Fox to the American people, and everybody's then say, "Oh, Trudeau's trying to stay in power by using the tariff thing as an excuse to stay in power." Well, that's impossible.
Yeah, and the whole point is that you can utilize Trudeau as a powerful speaker, because he, I'm not saying you necessarily don't have to agree with what Mr. Trudeau says, but you can utilize he can utilize some of the power of what he needs to say over the next couple of days, because it's meaningless, because it has no, it's not about him wanting to stay in power. It's about he's out. He's already resigned, right? Whoever is coming in, likely Mark Carney, will be elected on Sunday by the Liberals, and that will then change who's the prime minister, right?
Oh yeah, the whole point. My whole point was the astonishing ignorance.
It is very ignorant.
Trump, and the astonishing ignorance too when it comes to the amount of fentanyl. The astonishing ignorance that he puts out there that people take as fact.
Yeah.
And that's, and we can see that when he was dealing with the Ukraine as well. But his ignorance is transferred to the average person, and they take it for what he says.
Yeah.
Which is like, why, first of all, why do you take the word of a politician in the first place, especially one like him?
Okay. As of Monday, the 10th of March, Ontario will be adding a 25% surcharge on US-bound electricity.
That, to me, is a regrettable move, but I can understand that Ford is doing it.
I think it's a regrettable move. I understand it, but I don't agree with it.
Well, and Ford has good relationships with the states in which we sell power to, and he says he doesn't want to do it, but we are in a trade war with the United States, and the only way we're going to be able to get out of this is to show the Americans that engaging in this trade war is going to hurt them. Now, I saw a journalist that went to Buffalo and to Fort Erie to ask what different people on either side of the border thought of the trade war, when, of course, he found all kinds of things to be said on the Fort Erie side, because this is an existential threat to the Canadian economy. But when he went to Buffalo, he had a hard time finding anyone that even knew anything about it.
Yeah.
And when he did find somebody that had, they didn't know much about it. So to us, it's like the glaring thing, the most important thing in the news today. But in the United States, most of the people have just
but again,
not even paid much attention to it.
Again, though, Dave, I think it's a thing of look over here, see where my hand is, follow my hand, but the real activity is going on here, right? So just follow my hand, just ignore what's going on the bottom left of the screen, right? I think that's what we're seeing here with the trade war.
I'm not so sure what his real intent here is.
Yeah.
We find the good cop, bad cop thinking.
Yeah.
With Lichtman, he's supposed to be like the good cop. Trump is the bad cop. It seems to me incredible that the big three automakers, Stellantis, Ford, and GM, had to get a special meeting with Trump to dissuade him from putting on tariffs on the car industry. The car industry, which is completely integrated between Mexico, Canada, and the United States, and then get a 1 month reprieve from the tariffs that we're going to put on the automobile sector, and then told that you got to get your act together in 1 month to source your equipment. Now of course, they're pulling their hair out because they designed the trans country treaty, the USMCA. They organized their whole car plants to function as a free trade unit. And that was his treaty in 2018 that made that. And now they're saying, look, you cannot source these materials that fast. We've made massive investments in Canada and Mexico, as well in the United States. He doesn't seem to understand that. And then he says, okay, you got a month to source all your stuff from the U.S. Make your stuff here. I don't know. Where is that ignorance coming from? Is it pretend ignorance? Or real ignorance? I have a feeling it means real ignorance.
I don't believe that actually Trump understands how tariffs work.
Yeah, well, he's got the Lichtman doing the good guy, bad guy thing. Oh, don't worry about it. He's just looking for ways of making a stronger trade, renegotiate the trade thing. Trudeau, on the other hand, has said, look, no, this is an attack on our economy. He would find that Polyev and Carney and other people would say, yeah, this is an attack on our country to weaken us, to force us to be annexed by the United States. Trump is going to be one of those guys that he's going to make some good things, but most of the time he's just going to cause chaos.
Yeah, and of course, in all of this time, Doug Ford is sitting firmly behind his "Canada is not for sale" poster on his platform, and making his statements about how and about how we need to change things, and attacking the US. I don't agree with the slapping a 25% surcharge on electricity, because essentially it's going
to affect the average American, but I don't know. I'm not going to double guess Doug Ford. Doug Ford has come out swinging. He's got my respect. He ain't going to be no wilting flower. Not him, man. He's coming out. He's got his hockey stick, and he's going to elbow you in the corner. He's going to, he's going to trip you. He's going to fight you on the ice.
Yeah. And the question about this, of course, is that, hey, we probably sell to the US in US dollars anyway. So even if the Canadian dollar goes down against the US dollar, it's probably sold in US currency anyway.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because the US dollar is plunging right now. It went up. It was on its way up, and it peaked in January, in the early few weeks of Trump's administration, and now it's plunging.
Well, the interesting thing is
it's plunging fast because of the possible and likely recession if the tariffs go ahead. It causes a lot of uncertainty in market, which devalues the U.S. currency.
The other thing to note about all of this is that I went looking at the stock exchanges yesterday, and I noticed that the Nikkei and the Asian markets are all green. The European markets green, a bit of green here and a bit of red there, but mainly positive. And the TSX is down 1%, but the Dow Jones went down another 600 points yesterday.
It went back up after the tariff relief for the auto, but the uncertainty of the trade tariffs, especially they're on, they're off, they're on, they're off.
Yeah. Well, let me point out that was yesterday lunchtime when I was doing this looking. I was just doing some research about where the stock markets are, and as it happens, the Dow was down more than 600 points again yesterday at that time. Right?
Well,
you're right. It changes by the minute, and what may have been bad news at lunchtime was not bad news by 4 o'clock.
Well, like I said, it's bounced back up when the reprieve came for the auto industries, but that's only 1 month, and so because there's a whole lot of chaos going on, we are on the lip of a recession in the United States. We know that the recession will come to Canada if the tariffs continue, but because it's not just the tariffs, it's the uncertainty of the tariffs, the on and the off, and how it will affect world markets.
And as I said, the TSX was down 1% as well at lunchtime yesterday.
Yeah, so it's kind of a chaos. It's not a very good plan. Like if you want to bring manufacturing back to the United States, you do it in a planned way so that you don't affect your own personal economy that bad. You strengthen it, and if it's going to take you 4 years to build a plant to make pistons that were otherwise made in Canada or Mexico, then you do that. You plan that, and you tell the people, this is what we're going to do. We're going to plan that, and then we're going to put up tariffs so that you can, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But in this particular time, when globalization has freed up markets all over the world, and actually in the long run and overall has dropped prices for everyone in the world, it seems to be this isolation thing only rise prices,
Yeah. Well, I have to also say the other thing about that is obviously one could close a car plant tomorrow, at a sweep of a hand, hey, Ford Oakville's, Ford, it is Oakville, is closed, boom, done, right? Just an announcement, you could do it, right? And I don't want them to do that, but the point being is setting up a new manufacturing plant in a new place in America takes time. 9 months of tooling. We talked about that yesterday, at least.
Yeah. Now Ford is, of course, doing the annexation thing again. He's taunting JT, saying that he's the governor of the 51st state and Canada should become part of the United States, that kind of thing. So he's taunting us again with that, which is childish. If you ever, I don't know. It's just, boy, oh boy.
All right. So a couple of minutes before we finish.
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, so I wasn't meaning to actually say anything in relation to Ford Oakville, but apparently Ford Oakville is refitting right now. I thought that was the case, but I wasn't speaking ill of Ford Oakville, by the way.
Close for refitting.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it could be. Like, if you really want to look at it, like if this is an opportunity for EVs to get off the ground, like if our cars are going to start costing a whole lot more, our combustion engine and cars are going to be costing a lot more, or maybe our hybrids as well. One thing you could assemble the whole car here in Ontario with an electric motor and a battery. You don't have to go source much from the United States. The batteries can be made here. The electric motors could be sourced anywhere. It could even be sourced here. We have the steel for the superstructure. So if this is an opportunity for EVs to get off the ground because we don't need to rely on the United States to make EVs.
Yep. All right, let's go in a different direction before we end the show today. Declining butterfly population is research. According to researchers in the United States, there has been a declining, huge loss of U.S. butterflies over the last few years.
Yeah, I put this in. I put this in.
And not just monarchs, not just individual ones, but a whole raft of butterflies.
Yes, 22% decline overall in 20 years, 2000 to 2020. And the real problem here is they don't know exactly why. So we have a decline not only in our most favorite butterfly, of course, being the mighty monarch butterfly that does this incredible migration from North America all the way to Mexico. And it does it in stages too, sometimes. And mostly it does it in stages. So they're talking about all kinds of species of butterflies. And of course, butterflies are like birds. There are bird watchers that are fascinated with birds, but there are also people who are fascinated by butterflies and keep an eye on this thing.
Yeah.
Now a new study funded by the U.S. Geological Survey, probably going to be defunded by Doge, has finally compiled all the data and found that some bad news. Populations declined by 22%. And this, of course, would affect Canada too. We were.
Many of these share habitats between, across the whole of North America. In fact, actually, hey, most of these butterflies are fairly sensible. They don't care which land they're in.
Yeah, so I'm very certain that Trump is going to put tariffs on us because our butterflies are coming across the border. Those illegal butterflies are coming from the Canadian border.
No, they're American butterflies.
Yeah,
they're just up here on a tour.
Yeah. Butterflies are poisoning our blood. The Canadian butterflies are poisoning our blood. So
yeah, and I can see that, ironically.
Now they're important in the food chain, of course, because caterpillars, butterflies, they transfer nutrients. They also pollinate plants, and they also provide a lot of food for birds, like caterpillars and stuff like that. That's nature, right? Yeah. So how many eggs the butterfly lays, and then it becomes a caterpillar. A number of those caterpillars will then be used as food for baby chicks. The ones that survive will then become the next generation. And so the ecology and their place in the environment is so very, very important. Plus, they're really cool to look at. That's the next thing. So this is kind of a shocking thing. What's causing the decline, however, no one really knows. And now you could talk about fertilizers. You could talk about environment that is reduced. You can talk about climate change. Climate change is a big one because they don't know how it affects the migratory pattern of butterflies and how fast a butterfly can adapt to changing weather conditions. That's one of the things that people don't realize when we talk about climate change. Yes, we've always had climate change, but the rapidity of this particular climate change is the thing that is of issue. It's not as bad as a massive volcanic eruption like Krakatoa or something like that would change the weather for a couple of years because of the amount of ash that goes into the air, but will return to its place thereafter. This is a rather rapid, long-term warming effect because of the amount of carbon dioxide and methane we're putting into the air.
Okay, so there's a couple of things to note here from comments, right? Randy makes the point that butterflies do not fly high, so they're obviously not in flight paths and things like that. And they cannot get around massive cities, he says. All right, and Karen is saying the declining butterfly has been happening for decades, partly due to pesticides.
Yeah, that's one of the things they're talking about, but they can't wholly put it on pesticides, and that's their conclusion here. They cannot clearly define or clearly determine the total cause. This is a bit of a mystery. It's kind of like the amount of bats that were dying and bumblebees, bees, honeybees. It's very hard to determine exactly what is happening to honeybees. Partly it's disease, partly it's parasites, partly it's pesticides. It seems to be a combination of issues, but they haven't really been able to zero in on identifying those factors that have caused the decline of butterflies and bees and other such insects.
Right. Okay. So here's what we must do. Here's an absolute must, right? So you got to send the check to Karen for Karen and I to do their study and report, please. Yeah. So there we go. There we go. We'll send the check after the show, Randy.
We would, but
$0.00.
We would, but Doge has defunded us.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. And I think we can kind of leave it at that point. What do you think, Dave?
Yes, that's a good place to leave it. Without further ado, I bid you adieu. Pray for peace, everyone.